What's going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, back yet again with another King of Fighters Allstar video, and today we are going to be continuing our ongoing coverage of the 7 Deadly Sins collaboration event as we cover the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set, which is the newest 3-card battle card set added into the game with this collaboration. We're going to be putting it through its paces and comparing it to some of the most popular FES sets in the game in Guild Raid Lunatic, and try and see what kind of a difference it is going to make for your overall DPS. But before we do all that, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. So let's go ahead and jump into it today and talk about this card set. So this is going to be the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set. It is a 3-card set that is going to increase attack by 7% per card, or 21% total, with the set bonus being increases Starlight and Chill damage by 75% and active skill damage by 23%. So, as you all, I'm sure, are aware, this card set is very reminiscent of what we got with the 7 Knights collaboration card set. So, with this card set, there was a lot of hype behind it when people realized that it was going to be increasing the newest dot in the game's damage, which is, of course, Starlight. And therefore, it was definitely eyed for being a card set that would be beneficial in things like Guild Raid Lunatic. And really, with this card set, when we compare it to some of these other sets, and we're going to get into some damage comparisons here momentarily, but first I want to throw in some disclaimers. But when it comes to this card set, really the biggest issue with it right now is going to be the fact that it is limited in its capacity to have versatility across a plethora of modes. There's not a lot of modes right now that require Starlight damage. Really, the biggest one that comes to mind is obviously going to be Guild Raid Lunatic, which is why we are going to be using that as our test subject today in order to be testing this damage output compared to some of these other cards. As far as who will be our test subjects character-wise with this set, we are actually, as you can tell here, going to be using King, but we are also going to be using the 2 most popular Starlight dealers up until this point, which is going to be Elizabeth and Athena. So we're going to be taking these characters in, and we are going to be going into Guild Raid Lunatic, and we're going to be running damage comparisons in a very similar way to what we did the other day for those of you who may have seen the video that we did comparing Merlin's damage output in the Spider Robot. Instead, we are going to use Guild Raid Lunatic, but we're going to be using very much the same parameters. What we're going to do is we are going to basically wait until our Awakening rotation is up. We're going to run through all of our skills on our Awakening rotation until our Awakening rotation is gone, and then we are basically just going to see what the overall DPS was for each one of these characters using 3 different card sets per character. So the card sets that we are going to be using as far as King is concerned, obviously the 7Ds card set, the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge, but we are also going to be using an Akane set and a Leah set. So those are going to be the 3 card sets we are going to be running in these tests for King. And then as far as Elizabeth and Athena are concerned, being that they are both defensive type characters, of course we are going to be doing the 7 Deadly Sins set, but we are also going to be using the Athena set and the Kaya set. So those are going to be the card sets compared in this video. As far as some disclaimers that I want to get out of the way, there are going to be a few things that you guys are going to need to be aware of. First and foremost, with Athena, being that she is an SS character, she does have extra time on her Awakening rotation. There is really no way to circumvent that, and really this is not going to be necessarily at all whatsoever about the character's damage across the board against each other. That is completely irrelevant, and really if you want to do that kind of a damage comparison, you don't even really need to, because at the end of the day, Athena is probably just going to do better in a test like this anyway because of her additional Awakening rotation time. But there's really not going to be any type of way to compare these characters in this video. What we're instead doing is we are going to be comparing the card differences in damage across the board on the same characters. So basically, when we take a look at these, don't be comparing the damage that the characters are doing against each other. Instead, what you want to pay attention to, and the reason why this was set up in this way, is to compare the differences in damage between the card sets. Now, in order to mitigate any sort of riff-raff effects and things like that that might be affecting the overall damage output, what I went ahead and did is I used these Maxima cards. I used the ones that are all skill level 10. I picked one that's 6, of course. But We're going to be using these guys here because these are not going to affect our overall damage. Instead, they're just going to decrease our cooldowns by just that much more. So we're going to be using 2 of these on our king, and then as far as our ladies are concerned, we are going to be using the defensive character equivalent, which is going to be the Unreal Peace option card. So basically the same idea there. These would be the cards that you would normally use for cooldown reduction on these characters most of the time anyway. You can get into some of these other ones if you really want to that are going to increase attack and so on and so forth, but I avoided those for the purposes of this test, so that way we didn't skew our data just that much more. Now, of course, with things such as Athena, you have to take into account that there is a lot of RNG in comparison to that card set versus some of the other ones. Reason being is Athena does work on a random chance as far as the burst damage is concerned. So when you take a look at an Athena set overall, the biggest issue with testing it here is going to be the fact that it has that 30% chance to deal that extra damage equal to 150% of attack upon landing an active skill. There's nothing you can do about it, and honestly, it is going to be a situation where no 2 runs are going to be the same using that set, so keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind here with these damage runs is going to be the fact that you can't take into account things like crits and so on and so forth. I ran about 10 tests a piece per set per character with these, and I tried to pick a run that was a good kind of intermediate aggregate of what the numbers I was getting were. So basically these should be a good average baseline. But do realize that if you try to go in and you try to replicate these runs, there may be reasons as to why your numbers might be skewed just a tad compared to these. So that is going to be the kind of disclaimers that I wanted to get out of the way here at the beginning. We're going to jump into these tests and show you guys the differences these make. And then at the end of all of this, we're going to kind of give our overall thoughts on this card set and talk about how we feel about it in general and whether I feel like it is worth your guys' time or rubies. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and jump into these damage comparisons. Alright, you guys, so the first test subject that we're going to be using is going to be SS Athena, so we're just going to go ahead and get the queen herself out of the way here. So the first set we'll be using here in this footage will be the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set. I did go ahead and slow this footage down so that it would make it a little bit easier for you guys to see this stuff, but basically what we're going to take a look at here is what the overall damage output is on a full Awakening rotation, and then we will compare it across the board to some of these other card sets on her. So as I said in the beginning of this video, this Athena, obviously being an SS character, is going to have a longer Awakening rotation, so her damage output will show that as such. But as you can see here, we're doing about 40 million damage using our full Awakening rotation, using just the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set, and then also using the Kula and K cooldown reduction option cards. So next up, we're going to be using the Fighting Idol set, which is the Athena set. It is a very popular defensive card set. Unfortunately, it is an SS card set, so it is no longer available. However, it will be quite useful on characters such as Athena, and a lot of people do have this card set, so I wanted to go ahead and use this one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and compare this damage. We're looking at about 40 million with the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set, so we're going to see how it compares to this one here. So far so good, pretty good damage overall as Athena goes to town here on Omega Rugal. We're already at 34, and it looks like we're going to cap out at around 36 million damage total, and that is going to be the end of that damage run. So 36 million damage, about 4 million, give or take a couple 100,000 damage less than the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set. So overall, pretty good, respectable damage. Very, very nice. Again, this is a very good card set for her. So, but still, the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set did end up outpacing it. Next up, we are going to have probably the most popular defensive character card set, and that is going to be Shadow and the Truth, otherwise known as Kaya set. And we're going to do the same thing here, same idea. We're just going to go through our Awakening rotation and do as much damage as humanly possible, and then compare across the board. Right now we're looking at 40 million damage for the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set, and then we're looking at about 36.5 million for the Athena set. So as you can see here, this card set is going to do a little bit less damage than the other two. It's looking like we're about going to cap out at around 30 million. 30 million. So we're capping out at about 30 million with the Kaya set. So overall, in this test, the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set does seem to be the best in slot for this mode with her. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to move on to the next character on our list, and we are going to take a look at Elizabeth and see how she does in the exact same situation with the exact same set of cards. So starting out here with the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set, let's see if it ends up outpacing the same other two card sets with Elizabeth like it does for Athena. So with Elizabeth, there is a big thing to keep in mind here. Elizabeth actually boasts the most amount of defense to attack conversion in the entire game. So when you compare her the same way in the same test, she is going to be quite different with some of these other card sets, and you'll be able to see that here momentarily. But as you can see, we did end up dropping shield with about 17 million damage total on a full awakening rotation. Again, her numbers are always going to be much lower, considering the fact that she does have a shorter awakening window than an SS character. But being that we are comparing these characters across the board as far as these Starlight damage users, I wanted to make sure that I was as thorough as possible, so I threw all these characters into the same pool. And it's not about the characters, it's about the cards. So next up here, we are going to obviously have the Fighting Idol set, the Athena set, the SS set, and we are going to see what the difference is. And this set is going to outpace the other one based solely upon the fact, again, that Elizabeth does boast the most amount of defense to attack conversion in the game, and as you can see here, she did end up hitting about 19 million damage overall. So very, very good. Elizabeth is a very strong character. I think a lot of people sleep on her, which is very unfortunate. You see a lot of people talk about a lot of these types of characters when they come out, and really with Elizabeth, I feel like she got ignored quite a bit, but she is a very reliable Starlight user. So next up, Shadow and the Truth or Akaya set is going to be the final set that we are going to test with Elizabeth here. And again, we are just going to be taking a look at a full awakening rotation on the Guild Raid Omega Rugal. But now you can see here the shield is already down, so this set does do very well for her as far as overall raw damage. And again, it is going to probably outpace the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set just based solely upon the fact that Elizabeth again has so much defense to attack conversion. So there you go, guys. It's going to end up capping out at around 17.3 million. So overall, both of those defensive card sets ended up outpacing the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set with her, but we know why. Again, it has everything to do with her kit. So that is going to be the way that those compare. Next up, we are going to be taking a look at the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set with King, who is our newest Starlight dealer, and something I should preface this with: do not expect him to be able to perform as well for obvious reasons. He is not as high of an awakening level, nor does he possess as many multi-hit skills. So with him, he is going to have trouble getting the shield down before the nuke. There is not much I can do about that, unfortunately, because I tried about 10 times per card set, as I had mentioned, and I was never able to get that shield down in any of those runs outside of what I was able to put into this video in a reliable manner before he nuked. But as you can see here, he did about 9.4 with the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set with about 1% left on the shield. You can adjust this upward accordingly if your king is at a higher awakening level, and he'll probably be able to get that shield down before the nuke. Unfortunately, I just don't have that option right now. So next up, we're going to be using an Akane set here, and we're going to see how this compares. Now, this card set is going to be more RNG based, as we have mentioned, being that it has a random chance for that burst damage. So we're going to take a look here and see how this compares. We're already almost at the same amount of damage as the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set. And as we can see here, we're at about 9.7. Okay, so it did do a little bit more damage, but only just a tad, and there is a little bit of shield left on there compared to the other one. But with King, he is going to also have a bit of RNG himself, being that he does have the chance to remove and explode his own Starlight, so keep that in mind. It's very tough to get a proper aggregate with these. Next up, an Unidentified Observer or a Leah set, everyone's favorite. We're going to run through the same kind of test here. And with King, being that he does have RNG with the explosion, and there is RNG with some of these cards when you get away from some of the previous ones that we used on our ladies. It does end up skewing things, but there's not much you can do. So at the end of the day, you're just going to have to take what you can get out of it. Unfortunately, right now, I'm not able to use championship for damage comparisons because cards are not used in the numbers when it comes to championship right now with the way the season's set up. So this is the next best thing. But as you can see here, Eliaset did outpace the other two. So let's go ahead now that we've finished these runs, and we'll talk about what we can take away from this and kind of our overall thoughts on this card set. So overall, guys, what can we take away from this, and what are my overall thoughts? So when it comes to the Intensifying Thirst for Knowledge set, as we can all pretty much have gathered before release for this card set, once we had ideas of what this card set did, this card set right now is not necessarily in the best position because there just aren't that many instances where you would use it. Now, it's very important to note that this card set will be best in slot for certain characters, such as maybe even a Merlin or characters that deal chill damage as well. I decided to exempt them from this video because, to be honest with you guys, running all these different tests would be a lot of footage and it would make the time of this video quite long. So I decided to stay away from doing the chill characters and stuck with the Starlight characters. But really, with characters such as Merlin, this does end up being one of the better in-slot cards for them. We've already established this when we did our runs on the Spider Robot, which the link to that video will be in the description below. You can check that out. So this card set does have quite a few merits outside of the Starlight as well. But with it, it does have the caveat of the fact that it is more so a future-proof set, meaning that if you want to future-proof your account and you want to make sure you're prepared for future content, this is a great card set to have, because down the road we do expect there to be a Starlight Immortal, for instance. We do expect there to be more content that is going to require Starlight in general. And so therefore, really right now with this card set, if you're picking it up, you're more so doing it as an investment into the future, because right now there just are going to be limited amounts of ways that you can implement it and get as much usefulness out of it as you would like. However, with that being said, it does definitely do good work in Lunatic Guild Raid compared to some of these FES card sets, which really what I think that everybody should take away from this is the fact that these card sets, when they come out for these collaborations, even if they are not 6-star sets, they are still going to be able to put out the amount of damage that you will see alongside some of your FES sets. So they are able to perform around the same level as long as they are put in a position to succeed. And really something that I've talked about in the past that a lot of people I feel like need to kind of keep in mind, and this is something that myself and Saint had discussed in our podcast as well briefly, is the fact that whenever a collaboration comes around, typically the biggest thing to focus on is going to be the cards, and I feel like it's very easy for people to forget about the cards because of the characters and the excitement surrounding the new roster being added. However, when it comes to cards, they tend to age better than characters do. Characters come and go, they get phased out, they get power crept, but with cards, they tend to have a lot more longevity across a longer period of time. So when you think of card sets such as a Tekken set or the 7 Nights set more recently, or so on and so forth, a lot of these collaboration cards tend to age better. So whenever a collaboration comes around, I feel like a lot of people should really start kind of considering making sure that these cards are going to be a priority, because you don't want to be kicking yourself later on for missing these. Like for instance, with the Tekken set right now, tons and tons and tons of people complain about the fact that they want to rerun just for that set constantly. So don't get left out when it comes to these collaboration card sets. Now, I don't feel like this card set in the current state of the game is as strong as some of these other card sets we've gotten in the past with collaborations, but that is only based solely upon the fact that there are fewer instances where you would probably be using it. But as we've established in that previous video, this card set is going to be useful outside of Guild Raid Lunatic. It's just that right now that is the game mode that makes the most sense for it, and that's where a lot of people are really going to focus on. So that is why I decided to use this as a way to test. Now, as I had mentioned before we got to our final thoughts, if you go in right now and you go to Championship, which is what I typically like to use for these types of runs, unfortunately right now, if you take a look at the season rules, you cannot use set cards or option cards to kind of check damage, unfortunately. So the way Championship is situated right now with the season, there's not a whole lot that I can do about that. So that's why we decided to go to the next best thing like we have seen in today's video. But overall, would I recommend that you guys get this card set? Really, it comes down to the position you're in the game. If you have the ability and the rubies to go for this card set, I do think that it is worth having, and I think you guys should definitely consider picking it up. If you get lucky enough to pick it up when you're going for some of your finisher cards, then consider yourself lucky. If you saw my video pulling for my cards, I didn't get so lucky, but I digress. This is going to be a card set that right now you can largely take it or leave it. I don't believe that you are going to be missing out in a measurable way if you don't have it right now, especially if you don't have a character such as an SS Athena. However, if you are using it on some of these other characters like we've mentioned in this video, then obviously you're going to be able to get quite a bit of work out of it still, even without her, and also including some of your chill characters such as Merlin, like I had mentioned also. So overall, I don't think that you should break your bank on this card set. I don't think it's worth breaking yourself in light of the fact that we do expect to see some sort of limited run banner here momentarily after this run for the collaboration. So I do think that there is still definitely merit to making sure that you are prepared for something along those lines. But again, if you do have the ability to, I think that is worth it to future-proof your account, but don't be upset if you miss out on it right now. However, down the road, that could always change as some of these new game modes are added. So overall, guys, that's my thoughts on this card set. You guys can let me know yours in the comment section down below. There are quite a few instances and quite a few game modes in the game where you could use this to full effect and get quite a bit of usefulness out of it. This was just a way to test the overall damage output differences for some of these characters. I will be doing more tests as the week goes on this card set since I've only had it for a short period of time. However, in the interest of getting a video out to you guys before these banners go away next week, so that way you can make as good of an educated decision with your rubies as possible, I figured I would go ahead and do this today. So let me know in the comment section down below if this was useful to you, if this helped you guys, if you found this interesting. I hope it helped you guys at least educate yourselves on what the differences are with these card sets. If you enjoyed the video, smash that like button and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. You all enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.
Continue.